Have you ever wondered what you would do if you all of a sudden got $1 million? Think about that for a second. Now, obviously, pastor, I'm thinking about this from the standpoint of the church. What would we do if we came into $1 million? And why? Hey folks, I'm Pastor Eric Tritten from Gloria Lutheran Church in Hudson, Ohio, and this is a weekly word, and I'm glad you're with me today. There was a song that came out in 1992 by a band that we'll just call them BNL, and it was called "If I Had $1 Million." It led people to imagine. You know, the people in the song, they talked about all the fun things that they could buy, macaroni and cheese, Dijon ketchup, things like pre-wrapped bacon. It's a humorous song. It's fun to imagine what we would do if we had greater resources than we currently have. If you had $1 million, would you buy a car? Would you take a nice vacation? Would you invest? Maybe you'd do a home project. I hope you wouldn't buy a green coat. That's cruel. Never mind. Anyhow, maybe you'd give some to charity. I don't know. You'd maybe spend some time imagining and dreaming. Well, here at Gloria Day, this is the time of the year where we start doing some planning, looking at next year. And part of that process is it's thinking and it's praying and it's dreaming about the future. Trying to stretch the things that we're doing, trying to become more effective, trying to reach more people with the gospel, all of those kinds of things. And part of the process, when you start dreaming about the future, especially if you actually want to accomplish these things, is budgeting. Budgeting. There's the pastor, and he's talking about money again. Well, it is actually an important part of our lives. So as we're going through this, we are asking, where is God leading us? What opportunities is he giving us? What are the windows for new ministry that maybe the Lord is opening to us? And then what will it cost for us to go and to do these things that the Lord has given us these opportunities for? Now, when I think about the life of the church and pursuing new opportunities, there are often two limiting factors that we experience. And they can actually be related. There can be a faith factor in these. One of the limiting factors often, unfortunately, is people. Our society has shifted in terms of how we look at volunteerism, and it's more and more difficult to get volunteers to do things. And this isn't just happening in the church, it's happening all kinds of different organizations. There are probably all kinds of theories as to why that is. Let's just take that as though that is a reality. There are a lot of churches that have done a lot of incredible things purely on the force of the number of volunteers that were able to give of their lives, to give of their time and their effort. And so that's a big part of the life of the church. The other place that we run into need for people sometimes is we need specialists. Sometimes we just call them staff, people who are going to be focused on a certain part of the ministry, and then we generally pay them to do that work. And frankly, when we bring in staff, that is a huge part of a budget. I don't know if you've ever been on the end of hiring and putting a budget together to hire somebody, but it's not just a matter of salary, but you have salary, you have benefits, you have to decide, are you going to try to do full-time, or are you going to do part-time? There's a lot to this picture. And frankly, here at Gloria Day, we have a mix. We have a few people on staff, such as myself, who are full-time, but we have a number of people who are part-time as well, who they do a lot of work, and they actually kind of fall into two categories. They are very much hired part-time, but they still volunteer a whole bunch of time, and they are a huge blessing to the work that we do as a congregation. So if we don't have people, it's really hard to do ministry. That's the first limiting factor. The second limiting factor is, well, you may have guessed it already, money. When we think of staffing, and when we think of events, when we think of the cost of doing business, this building wasn't built for free. We have computers that we use. There's mileage that's paid when we go out and we represent the church and we work. There are all kinds of musical instruments that we own here. We own property. All of those things require cash. They require finances. In fact, if you were to look at people and property, kind of the staff and the property part of a budget for a church, that's probably 90% of that budget, maybe even more. So there's a pragmatic reality when we talk about money within the church. And that reality is that work in the church, work in this world, it requires investment. It requires the investment of money. And in the church, we usually talk about that in terms of tithes. If that word is strange to you, it literally means a tenth. And in the Old Testament, God instructed his people to bring back a tenth of what they got to give to the Lord for the work in the temple or in the tabernacle. You can think about the offerings. You can think about gifts that are given to the church. Financial resources are an important part of being able to operate and do the work that we've been given to do. So we invest money, but we also invest life, our lives, into serving our Lord and doing the work in the church. So our time is often spent, giving back to the Lord, using our skills, using our abilities, using talents that we might have, putting effort into the life of the church. And often both of those things are connected to a word that we don't like to use, but that's sacrifice. That we sacrifice some of our money, we sacrifice some of our life, not like actually, but we sacrifice our priorities in order to give some of our time and our abilities to the church in order to help people meet Jesus and to experience his love and forgiveness in their lives. Jesus talked about money a lot, and one of the things that he said was that, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And it's just a pragmatic reality. The things that we treasure, we are going to put our heart into those things. That's not exactly what Jesus was talking about. He was talking about us in our relationship with God, but that is part of what he's focusing us on, that where our treasure is, our heart will follow. And if our treasure is Jesus and his love and his forgiveness, then the priorities of our lives will follow that. And that's a spiritual reality. When we think about God and we think about his needs, the truth of the matter is God doesn't need anything. I love this part of Psalm 50 where God says to his people, if I were hungry, I wouldn't tell you. He says, I have the cattle on 1,000 hills. It all belongs to me. In other words, he's kind of saying, I don't need you. And it's like, oh, wow, that's kind of a slap to the face. But he's putting us in a position where we recognize how he works in our lives and what our priority is as we work in this world. See, the work of the church is to serve God by serving people. People need what we have to offer. When we think about social programs within the church, it's about people. However, when we think about proclaiming the gospel, when we talk about preaching and teaching the forgiveness of sins, that is the most basic human need, to be reconciled with God. And that is kind of our unique, corner on the market. We have this gift that God has given, this good news to share, that there is forgiveness and there is available reconciliation with God. Luther once said, God doesn't need your good works, but your neighbor does. So even you need a place, a person, a church that tells you about God's love and delivers his forgiveness to you. It's an important part of our lives. And God has blessed us. He's honored us with an ability to participate in his work. He draws us into it. And it's a life work. It's not just a matter of I'm going to throw some money at that. Money is necessary, but it's a life work. We're going to put our lives into the work and the ministry of the church. And when our lives are given to the Lord in His service and in the ministry and care for other people, I think our finances will actually follow. It's a lot of fun sometimes to think about what we might do if we got a windfall of cash, to think about the fun things that you might be able to participate in. But sometimes it's also good to simply sit back and to think about what we do with the things that we have, to recognize how blessed we are, the gifts that God has given to us. And so here in the church, we like to encourage tithing, giving back 10%, for the Lord's work. Now, if that seems daunting, that's okay. Maybe think in terms of percentage giving and see that as a journey that you might follow to say, I'm going to hopefully someday end up over here at 10%. But for right now, I'm going to kind of live at 2%, at 3%, 5%, because God does say that our giving should be intentional. This is in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. He talks about that we would regularly set aside a portion of what we have in order to serve other people. And it's not a matter of giving our leftovers. Our heart is in the matter. Our heart is in the faith. It's in this work. And so it's a priority. And even our giving becomes a priority because it happens out of gratitude. Recognizing the love that we have experienced, we want to give back to God in order to do His work in the lives of others. So, next couple of weeks, I'm going to talk a little bit more on this kind of idea of if I had $1 million from the standpoint of the church. And I hope that these will be helpful to you. And if they are, I encourage you to please like it, share it, help other people to find it, so maybe they benefit from it too. God bless you.